The first distinction here from most art, which is almost always about light, is that rather than having a work that's about light or tries to depict light, this work is light. We have a primal relationship to light. We usually express that by saying we have a primal relationship to fire. But it is this light that we are looking at. And the power of this light can be diminished by having it tell stories, so that if we use the movie, for instance, we're really more involved in the narrative than we are in the power of light. But when we look into the fire, there the power of light exists because there is no image, no narrative. So I do remove image, I remove object, because we usually use light to illuminate things. But I'm more interested in the thingness or physicality of light itself. So that light is becomes the revelation itself rather than being the bearer of the revelation. In the tradition of art, I mean, I may have been one who was seemingly challenged that tradition in my country because we had, at that time, paintings were in frames and sculpture was on a pedestal. So I was part of what some people feel is destroying tradition. I feel to be in every way part of tradition. Art happens in any medium, and it's you can write a haiku poem on a paper sack and it's as profound as Shakespeare. So those things are not the big issue.
It's really quite a remarkable body of work that he's created over about 45 years. He's, I think, unique in using light as a material. He's not using other forms, other materials. It's light itself that you're looking at in this exhibition. For most visitors, it's their first experience in a kind of pure way with the materiality of light, that light can be something of itself. I mean, we know that we inhabit a world of light, but we use the light simply in its reflected form off of objects. We don't see ourselves seeing. We don't think how we perceive. How does it work in our heads that we see? James Tarrel's work allows visitors to sort of unfold their sense of perception, unfold their sense or increase their awareness of sight itself. So it can be confusing in some of the very large space that's here, the Gansfeld. In this kind of space, what he is exploring is a landscape. He talks about it as a kind of new landscape. New in the sense that it has no horizon, but like diving into the deep ocean where you lose all sense of up or down, or being in outer space, or even being in a virtual world. In his Gansfeld, you walk physically into a space that you know to be an architectural space, and yet it seems infinite, it seems to have no horizon. And what visitors find often is it's very confusing initially, because we're not used to being in those kinds of vast, limitless, infinite seeming spaces with no horizon. So it can be sort of disturbing, but then it's a revelation. Then it's a kind of breakthrough for visitors to understand this new way of thinking about light. You actually move into a work of art, so you are inside of a work of art. And in that immersion, it's like swimming in a pool of light. You're immersed in this material of light. The thing that strikes me about James Tarrel's work is it's been shown here for the very first time in Russia in a very large exhibition, a spectacularly good exhibition, but it's been shown in Asia, in Europe, in the United States, Australia, all over the world. And because he is dealing with something that all humans experience, which is our relationship to light and our ability to see and how we perceive the world, it is universal in that respect. Its content is not tied to a culture or to a history or to an art historical reference. And one thing I would ask all viewers is to spend time with each work of art. These are not a static sculpture or a static painting that is unchanging. These change. The light in some of these works actually is changing, but more importantly, your eyes and your perception is changing the longer you spend with them.
Well, I took psychology in order to understand the perception of light, because if you study Goethe, if you study the color wheel, you take blue paint and yellow paint and mix them, you'll get green. But if you take blue light and yellow light and mix them, you'll get white. This is a shock to many people, so that we have to learn the spectrum. So I realized right away that the painting courses and the art courses that were set up for teaching art were fine as long as you painted. But if you really wanted to work with light, you had to understand the spectrum and how the eye saw light. So I had to have a different education in order to be interested enough to work with light itself.
He's an excellent pilot flying small planes, and how what he learned from flying is translated into these spaces. And he talks about the moments in flying when you are flying and you might have an atmospheric change, and it might create a wedge form or a physical seeming form in flight. So I love to hear him talk about those kinds of influences from the real world, in the same way that flying inside of a cloud is another example of those landscapes that have no horizon. There's no up, there's no down, there's no frame of reference, and so those are important to him and to his work.
I have to tell you that Scriabin worked with the color organ. So he worked with sensory synesthesia, just what I work with, as a composer. And we only hear today half of his work. We only hear the sound part, because the color organ that was performed by his wife, we forget. So those are great things, and those are things that really inspired me, and I thought were fantastic. Here's someone working with sensory synesthesia. That's the effect of perceiving in one sense, hearing, affecting the perception in another sense, seeing or light. Mix those two together, and that's what he did. And this is something I find brilliant and amazing. So these things exist. We forget them. They disappear, then they get reinvented by someone else coming along. So there's sort of nothing new under the sun, but it comes out seemingly new in new expressions. I keep working at each sort of series of work, except the projection series. I did those from 66 to 68, and then kind of moved into other work. But all other forms of the work have developed over time, so I've continued their development, some starting later than others. But I first started working with a hard image of light, and then began to work more with the suffused soft quality of it, inhabiting a space, and confronting that space inhabited by another light, sometimes being bathed in it, walking into it, sometimes actually having it come and having the behind the eyes seeing, as in the piece Light Rainfall here.
This is a specific kind of work, a perceptual cell that is for one person at a time. So people here will have to sign up in advance. And in this, you lie down and you are helped into it by two helpers dressed like laboratory workers. This is a sphere, is a Ganzfeld, and rapidly changing lights. And what is so interesting about this work is that it is about the connection or the difference between external seeing, which we're so used to looking around, seeing the world around us, see the light comes to us and we see a chair, and internal seeing. Imagine your last dream and the light that you see in color. So there's internal color and external color. This work brings them together. So when you're in that space, yes, your eyes are open, and yes, lights are being shown, but they are triggering responses inside of your head. So you're getting back and forth, like a duet between internal seeing and external seeing.
This is invasive. You You may have thought you knew the power of light, but here you can really see and feel this. Those images are not there. They're only in your mind. But these are things that don't exist out in, quote, the real world. But what is the real world? The real world is this world that we assemble, this reality that we assemble by a consensus. Remember, reality is only a consensus, and that consensus changes.